So welcome back, everybody. We're going to do a different class tonight called Around the World with 6 Grapes. And I think I was mentioning it to a couple of you. I think when Mark and I started this, I said, well, let's do 4 grapes, because that'll be 12 wines, 3, that'll be good. And then the catalog came out, and it was 6. And it's like, well, I'm glad it's Friday night that this will be and not Thursday night, because the productivity in Richmond will go down dramatically if we do. But so the format for tonight is, what we're going to do is, we're going to look at 6 of the major grape varieties of the world and taste them from 3 different areas of the world. And that really is the essence of what makes wine interesting, is the fact that these grapes that are the same, basically, will taste so different grown in these different parts of the world. You know, it's interesting. It's almost similar. When I moved to Richmond many, many years ago, I was at the grocery at the U-Crops and was there was an elderly lady there, and she lectured me on the benefit of Hanover tomatoes. And I know that everybody's heard that about Hanover tomatoes are the best, and then of course you go to South Carolina and they're the best, et cetera. So, well, that's what happens with wine as well. And so we're really going to have a fun time, because we'll see some very different styles of wine as we go through. So some are worlds apart, and some are a little bit closer. So we're going to touch on we're going to touch on most of the major wine growing areas of the world, except we won't be hitting Italy tonight. So, but we'll be doing New Zealand, California, Washington State, Oregon, France, Germany, and New Zealand, and Australia as well. So my original proposal was to get like a Lear G30 and just fly to all these places, but we figured it'd be about $58,000 a person, so that would be a little bit tough. So to tell everybody a little bit about Ladybug and where that came from, I'm involved with the Richmond ARC, the Association of Retarded Citizens, and in 2001 we started an event called the Ladybug Fund, where we raise money for low-income families for kids with special needs to make sure they can get therapy or equipment. It's a great cause, and I hope you will not, you'll pardon the shameless promotion of a good cause, but we have our wine tasting event coming up at RIR Raceway on the 18th. We've got 75 wines. I pick out myself from all my suppliers. We have 10 restaurants. So if you have any, if you'd like to attend, it's Saturday night, starting about 6 o'clock to 9:30. All the information's right there. Also, to let you know that I donate my fee for tonight to the Ladybug Fund, so you guys are helping us help these kids, so it's a great cause. And so we're going to discover wine, have fun, and help some kids. So with that, the first thing I want to do before we get into, and this will be a little bit of a repeat for some of you, but I want to just kind of highlight really quickly some of the key things about wine, because it's really critical to how I talk about wines. Because when I do my classes, I really like to focus on the grapes, because the thing about wine is it's very, very confusing, but it really isn't, because we're really talking about, there are about 20 different grapes that make up about 95% of all the wine that is purchased and sold in the U.S. But you'll see as we go through, a grape that is grown here is called something different, it tastes different. So it's really a very simple base amount of information, but there are so many variables to it. So one of the things I get all the time is people ask me, and this will be, I think, highlighted as we go through tonight. They say, well, why do wines taste different? How come a Pinot Noir that's grown here tastes so different from a Pinot Noir that may be grown halfway around the world or right down the street? And it's really these factors. It's primarily the grapes used in the blend, and that one's pretty obvious. Obviously, a Cabernet is going to taste different from a Pinot Noir, et cetera. The soil. We're going to talk a lot about the different soils tonight, because winemaking, at the end of the day, it's about climate and soil. Climate tells you, can you grow great wine grapes there? And then soil, along with the climate, will tell you what grapes you can grow there. Because we'll see it's very, very specific. And Europe has learned this after 300 and 400 years of growing wines. We're just learning it now in the U.S. We've been at this about 40, 50 years now, and not as long in Virginia. It's really a relatively young industry as well. The clones used. One of the things I'll talk a lot about with Pinot Noir is the fact that there are different clones of Pinot Noir. There's not just one Pinot Noir grape or one Cabernet Sauvignon grape or one Sauvignon Blanc grape. You'll learn that there are many, many different clones of these grapes, and so that's what really accounts for making these wines taste differently. I always tell people you should think of grapes like apples in the grocery store. You know, you go in, there's Red Delicious and Gala, et cetera, and they all have different tastes and textures. Well, wine grapes are the same thing. They're all just going to taste differently because of that. Wine growing and farming practices, that one again I think is pretty obvious. It's how we grow the fruit, what we do in terms of the rootstocks, the irrigation. There's literally thousands of variables that go into how we grow the fruit. And I would encourage you, if you ever visit a winery, if you ever get a chance, talk to the vineyard people. You know, the winemakers are interesting. Obviously, there's a lot going on there. But where you really learn about wines and what goes on is really with the vineyard people. Because, I mean, you know, I've had a couple vineyard people that have worked at wineries I've been involved with. And, you know, these folks talk about dirt for hours, and it's fascinating, and everything that goes on. And they can really tell you what's happening. And then, of course, winemaking practices. You know, think of the winemaker's kind of like the chef. You know, the vineyard manager's the farmer, and the winemaker's really the chef. So it's what he does with it once it comes to the winery. Now, they talk a lot. Obviously, they're interdependent, but it's really that's really their role. The key to my class is in the way I like to talk about wine, because, and you've probably heard this before, but you know, wine people are crazy. They really are. You know, they talk about all these things, and you know, you hear these. I call it the hints of anise and huckleberry. And you'll go to the store, say I'd like a nice like Cabernet for dinner, and they'll start talking about the mid-body palate and all this stuff, and you're like, what are they? I don't even know what they're talking about. So when I describe wines, I like to describe them in three ways: body, taste, and flavor. The body is the weight of the wine, and you get it primarily from the extract and the alcohol, et cetera. When I talk about taste, I'm talking about your sense of taste. And there are really only 5 things that you taste: sweet, sour, bitter, salt, and then the 5th taste is umami. Umami is like that savory sensation that you get with very good Parmesan cheese or mushrooms or things like that. So that's that umami sensation, the umami taste. And there are some components in wine, tannin, acidity, and sugar, that drive these bitter, sour, and sweet flavors. Because it has been my experience in 30 years of doing this that if somebody doesn't like a wine, it's 95% of the time it's because of the taste components, that either the wine is out of balance, or they just don't like a wine that has a lot of that particular component to it. I recently just read a book it's called Taste, and very exciting, but it talks about this lady who's actually a food scientist and developed all these tastes. And it was really fascinating about how everybody's sense of taste and sensitivities in taste are very, very different. And but this is the one that really doesn't get talked about. So you'll see as we go through, when I'm talking about these varietals, I've highlighted in the material what the dominant taste characteristics tend to be, so you can get an idea of, okay, well, you know, Cabernet is going to lean towards maybe some bitterness because of this, et cetera, et cetera. So that'll all be cleared up. Flavor is where it's at. Flavor is, when I talk about, it's all about your sense of smell, because whenever we eat or drink something, really 80% of what we experience is really our sense of smell. You know, it goes back to the Brussels sprouts, and if you don't like them, just hold your nose, you know, and so that's really critical. And the one thing that again, I'll talk about and focus on is usually when a wine is described, a flavor, it'll generally be described in 3 ways. It'll have a fruit descriptor to it. It'll generally have an herbal or an earthy descriptor to it. And then if it has an oak component to it, usually that's described as well. And this will be clear as we go through, but I wanted you to kind of have this background. Just some kind of reiterating what I talk about body. And the way I teach people to talk about body is really think of it like, it's just like milk. You know, a light-bodied wine is skim milk. A medium-bodied wine is like 2%, and a full-bodied wine is just like whole milk. So that's how you should think about body. And so what I've done here in the booklet is I've taken these are the major grape varieties that you're going to come across, and I've put them on this chart. And notice I've listed on each one, I said body potential, because this is where they tend to fall out, okay? Now the winemakers can do some little things to kind of manipulate them a little bit to make them maybe a little bit lighter, a little bit more full-bodied, et cetera. But as a general rule of thumb, this is where they're going to fall out, okay? So and you'll notice that the whites tend to cluster in the light to medium bodied, and the reds tend to cluster more towards the full bodied wine. So this will just give you an idea of where these grapes are going to come out. One of the key taste and textures is an element called tannin. I like to talk about this because particularly when we get into the Shiraz and the Cabernet, this is going to be very important. A lot of times people will say to me, I don't like a wine because it tasted bitter. Well, usually the bitterness is driven by this component called tannin. It comes from the skins primarily, then also the stems and the seeds of the grapes. And if you look at the chart, this is a cluster of fruit you would get in the grocery store, and this is a cluster of Cabernet Sauvignon. And the tannin comes out of the skins, and the Cabernet is a very, very small berry with a very, very thick skin, so it has a much different skin to juice ratio than other grapes would. So Cabernet tends to have a lot more tannin to it. And tannin's the element that gives the wine a lot of body, that bitterness. It's also the element that gives it the potential to age as well. And again, I'll hit back on these as we go through. Back to the tannin potential of red wines. Very similar to body, the reds tend to cluster into more medium to more full tannin. And then the whites tend to not have a lot of tannin there at all. Okay? Any questions about tannin? And I know a lot of you have been through the class where we actually taste this, and it's really pretty nasty, so I'm sparing. Yeah, everybody's shaking their heads like, yeah, I'm not doing that again. Okay. One of the other taste components in wine that's important to talk about is acidity. And the source of acidity is the juice of the grape itself. And if you were to go out early in this growing season, the vineyard, and you would pick the fruit off, it'd be very, very small, a very hard berry, and very, very acidic. The acid level is very, very high early in the growing season, and it decreases as the grape matures. And one of the functions of acid is it gives the wine body. Another function is it balances out the alcohol taste in wine, because we don't want wines to taste like alcohol. That's what bourbon's for, and scotch and all that. There's plenty of other options there. So the acid level, we want it in a particular range when we harvest it. Okay? Now, you see with the grapes, there's a little bit more of an even distribution in terms of the acid potential. There's some whites that tend to be lower in acidity, and then some that tend to be higher in acidity, and the reds tend to be clustered, again, a little bit more of a wider distribution than either the body or the tannin. The last major component is sugar, and this is similar to acid. The source is the juice of the grape itself. I mean, winemaking is really very, very simple. We grow fruit, and when it's ripe, we pick it. Well, the way that we know it's ripe is the sugar level, and the sugar level, like most fruits, is low as the grape matures and increases as the grape gets towards ripeness. And that is really the primary determinant of harvest. And so it's probably hard to see with the glare there that'll mitigate soon, but we use a little device it's called a refractometer. It looks like a little telescope. And so what we do is we actually go out in the vineyards, we take grapes and we crush them open so the juice goes down on the end of this refractometer. It's got a little lens, a little cap that opens up. We squirt the juice in there, close the cap, and then point this up to the sun, and the sugar in the juice refracts the light coming through, and inside there's a little gauge. So, okay, this is 22 or 23% sugar. So that's how we test the sugar level. And that's very, very important, because your sugar level at harvest, you take that figure, you multiply by 0.55, and that roughly gives you your finished alcohol level. And remember what I said about acidity, how it kind of balances out the alcohol taste in wine? Because what happens is, as your fruit matures, the acid drops down, the sugar increases. If you harvest out here, you have more sugar, which is going to give you more alcohol, and you also have less acidity to balance out that alcohol taste in wine. So that's why harvest is so critical in wine country. Is you make sure you don't want to get it past a particular window. So acidity and sugar are their primary determinants of harvest. Something that's been going on lately, you hear more and more winemakers now talk about, they'll actually walk the vineyard, and of course they'll check the numbers, they'll check the acidity, and the sugar will be checked as well. But a lot of winemakers will also now, they'll taste the fruit. And while the numbers may be there and close to the range that they want, they'll say, you know what, there's not as much flavor there as I'd like. So they'll talk about the flavor, how they want to get a little bit more flavor and intensity in the fruit. And again, if you ever get a chance to go to wine around harvest time and go out in the vineyards and taste the fruit, because it's really kind of bizarre, because it doesn't taste, it's not this. You know, the product we have in the glass, it really tastes so different. The thing that amazes me about winemakers is the aromatic development of fruit and young wines is very, very low. And the aromatic and the flavor development really takes place a lot, particularly after the wine is bottled. And the art of winemaking is really interesting, because these winemakers have to taste this raw fruit that's in a very undeveloped and immature stage and kind of extrapolate out what it's going to taste like after they do to it what they want to do to it. And that's really the art of winemaking. Winemaking is really an art and a science, and that's what makes it fascinating. Now, again, a pretty wide distribution on the sweetness potential in white wines. And one of the things I want you to notice, there's a couple grapes like Riesling and Chenin Blanc, for example, that can do equally well as a dry wine or a sweet wine. There's a couple grapes that'll do that. And we're gonna highlight Riesling as we talk about it. The reds, other than the sweet reds that are kind of new on the market in the port wines for dessert, reds are pretty much dry. They tend to not do as well as a sweet wine as the whites do. The last component I want to talk about is oak. And oak is kind of in between taste and flavor, because there's both a taste and textural component to it in a sweetness, and then also an aromatic component to it. But oak is a very important factor in winemaking and really in aging, and so it really deserves discussion. And the two functions of oak are, number one, it imparts a vanilla and sweetness to the wine. Now, you know, think about this. Where would that come from? You don't think of oak tasting like vanilla. Well, what we do with the barrels, and again, I apologize for the sun, but what we do is we actually toast the inside of the barrels. We don't want to leave the wine in contact with raw wood, although the barrels, the wood has been aged outside for 2 to 3 years before the barrel was even assembled. It's still pretty raw. So they actually toast the inside of the barrel, and so you get this caramelization of these wood sugars that literally give you that caramel flavor from the barrel. The other benefit of oak is you will get an evaporation of water and alcohol out of the wine, therefore concentrating the flavors a little bit. So the amount of time that a wine spends in oak is really up to the winemaker, but it's really a critical part of winemaking. And oak is another one of those subjects that is very, very basic at its core. But then you get into, well, is it a new barrel? Because a new barrel will give you about twice as much oak extraction out of the barrel into the wine as a 1-year-old barrel. So the half-life is pretty quick. The forest where the barrel was from, how is it toasted? There are different toast levels, medium and heavy, that indicate just what you'd think. The heavier is a darker toast to it that gives you a little bit more of a vanilla flavor to it. And those are really up to the winemaker to decide what they want to do. There's no real right answer to this whatsoever. Again, it's very much like a chef in the kitchen doing what they like to do. So and again, the oak potential tends to be, the reds tend to be aged in some oak because frankly, they really need it to kind of soften them up a little bit. A bigger distribution, again, on the white grapes, and Chardonnay is something that goes from really none to light to heavy. That's one of those grapes that can really do a lot of. Winemakers like Chardonnay because it really, the grape itself is really relatively neutral. And it really takes up the taste of soil, which I'll talk about in the examples. Oh, that's one thing I was supposed to ask. If anybody has your cell phone, make sure that's turned off so it doesn't interfere with my mellifluous voice as heard it described. And what was I talking about? The oak, right? Yes. The oak, okay. So, Chardonnay, thank you very much. See, I knew you were going to pay attention. Very good. So, winemakers like Chardonnay because it tends to be, of all the major grape varieties, the one that's the most neutral in terms of its inherent flavor, I should say. So it really works well with different soils. It really tends to take up the taste of soil, and it really works well with oak. And so that's why, actually, in California about 20 years ago, we were actually over-oaking our Chardonnays because we really weren't growing fruit that was as expressive as we are today. So we had to kind of make up for it, and we tended to over-oak it. So, just going to two quick slides about flavor. Again, and this is a picture of a Chardonnay vineyard that is being harvested as we speak. And there are 4 ways that a wine will develop flavors. Number one is there are flavors that are just natural to particular grape varieties. And so if you go in the back of some of these wine magazines where they do all the write-ups of all the wines and the scores and all that stuff, I guarantee with Chardonnay, for example, 70% of those write-ups will say something similar to apple. They just will. Pinot Noir will say cherry plum, earthy mushroom. Sauvignon Blanc will say citrusy, lemony, etc. These grapes just taste that way. That's just the way they taste. And, excuse me, that's just their flavor. So that's one way. The second way is from the soil that I was just mentioning about. We're going to be tasting 2 different Chardonnays that are grown in very specific soils that do well for Chardonnay. We'll see how that, again, has the impact. One that we're going to be drinking is a wine called Chalk Hill Chardonnay. And it's grown in this soil it looks like chalk, which is where the name of the area came from, but it's actually volcanic ash, so it gives it kind of a mineral component to it. So it's very, very unique. Next is from wine growing practices, and again, through the reflection, you may not be able to see this, but you may notice on your page, this is a vineyard that's literally being harvested. I took this picture myself. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. And this vineyard, if you were to look down the row, it's what they call Y trellis. So the vines are trellised up this way, okay? So you've got the canopy up here and the grapes are kind of underneath, okay? So what the winemaker did, he came out to the vineyard manager and said, what I want you to do is go to the outer fruit zone, the canopy, outer part of the canopy, and pull some leaves. Generally, we'll pull leaves off the vine because we don't want to have too much energy going into the vine, and we want the energy going into the fruit. So it's all about balance, balancing the load of the vine and the vine system. The other reason he chose to have this done in this case, he wanted to get a little bit of burn on that fruit that was on the outside, so it gave it another little bit more of a caramel flavor to it. Now this isn't, I would not say this is a widespread practice in California that you're trying to burn a portion of the fruit, and I don't know in terms of as a percentage of the vineyard, how much of the vineyard was done. Was it 10% or 5% or 50%? But I thought it was just a really good example of how we can add some flavors into the fruit, because what I find interesting is, the thing about wine is, these are grapes, they're citrus products basically. And we look at all these flavors that are used to describe them. Caramel and et cetera. And think about, you don't buy grapes in Kroger or Martin's and expect them to taste them home and have them taste, caramel or buttery, et cetera. So that's one of the, so that's another one of the ways from they can develop flavors is how we do the farming. And last but not least is the winemaking practices. And the best example here is butteriness I kind of talked about. I mean, who here has seen or heard somebody describe Chardonnay and they say it's buttery? Again, where in the world is that coming from? Well, it comes from a process called malolactic conversion, where we convert a molecule of malic acid to lactic acid. It does 2 things. It actually softens the overall acidity of the wine, and it actually just develops this buttery flavor. And it's something that has been, it actually is kind of can be naturally occurring in the winery. And it has shown, particularly with Chardonnay, to really have a beneficial effect because it softens the acidity up a little and gives it that buttery component too. And we'll taste that, I'm sure, in some of the wines today. But so that's where we get that kind of that buttery flavor from. So what I've done is I've just kind of recapped for you the flavors and what you tend to see. And this is very important, particularly when it comes to food wine pairing, which I think I have that coming up in the fall. There's a shameless plug for another class, But it's very important, and the thing I want you to note is when you see white wines described, they tend to be described with white or citrus type flavors to them. Pear, apple, lemon, etc. Red wines tend to be described with the red or dark fruits, blueberry, blackberry, pomegranate, cherry, plum, etc. When you see the herbal descriptors for white wines, they tend to be more herbal flavors, dill, floral, flowery, orange blossom, white pepper, things like that. Red wines tend to be described with earthy flavors, tobacco, Pinot Pinot Noir, Pinot Noir, Pinot Noir. Mushroom, that's the one I was looking for. So it's just, and again, that's some guide for helping you to pair wine. But I've got all those flavors on the charts that we'll talk about, so I wanted to just kind of go through this very, very quickly. Okay, now we're ready to jump into the Sauvignon Blanc. So we're going to be tasting 3 Sauvignon Blancs. The first is the Roddy Strong Charlotte's Home Sauvignon Blanc. The second is the Sancerre. Is a Sancerre from France, and then last but not least is a wine, Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. So this is my little cheat sheet. I tried to put everything about the varietals that you need to know on one card. So now that you know all about body, taste, flavors, etc. So what I've done on these cards is I've listed where the body tends to be, and I've highlighted the key ones. For example, with body, Sauvignon Blanc tends to be a lighter bodied wine. I've also highlighted what tends to be the dominant taste and flavor characteristics with those wines. Okay, so when you're thinking about Sauvignon Blanc, the dominant characteristic with Sauvignon Blanc, I don't care where it's made in the world, tends to be acidity. It's just a high acid wine. So if you want to try Sauvignon Blancs, you have to like the acidity. I've also highlighted what tend to be the key fruit flavors, talked about a lot of other stuff here. Here's some food and wine pairings, and then some miscellaneous information in there. This is, cheat sheets got me through college, so I figured, well, it can't hurt everybody else, right? So this is your cheat sheet on Sauvignon Blanc. So go ahead and taste the first wine that you had, the Sauvignon Blanc again. You may notice that one of the things I'm doing is it's kind of the standard wine tasting protocol is, you'll notice when I sip, I draw some air through it, because remember, wine is about taste and flavor. So if you take a little sip of wine and swallow like you normally do, you get a certain amount of taste. If you take a little bit, put it in your mouth, and then draw air through it, what you'll notice is it increases the intensity of the flavor. That's why wine people are always, doing that. It literally does increase the intensity of the flavor of the wine. It won't affect the taste components at all, the bitterness, the sourness, or the sweetness. But if you go ahead and do that, everybody, with one of the wines, just take it. It's always good to practice with white first in case we lose a little bit, right? Yeah, don't do this in somebody's home with red wine when they've just renovated the dining room or something, okay? Yeah, and do it with white. So just put a little in front of your mouth, just kind of draw it through like this. So what you want to do, and you'll notice how much the intensity of the wine increases as you do that. So let me talk a little bit about the areas. A couple key facts about Sauvignon Blanc. The most important thing that you need to know about Sauvignon Blanc that is my favorite wine. Okay, so that will be on the quiz. A couple quick things here. This is interesting. You would never think this. This grape, along with a grape called the Cabernet Franc, is the parent of Cabernet Sauvignon. One of the things they've done over the last 20 years is they literally have done DNA analysis of these grapes and where they came from, and there are some very interesting surprises there. But the key with Sauvignon Blanc is growing it, okay? The key with Sauvignon Blanc is the winemaking is relatively straightforward. There's not a whole lot that you do with the wine versus others, but it's really about the growing area. And one of the things about Sauvignon Blanc, the vine tends to be a very, very quick grower. And remember before I talked about we don't want too much of the plant to grow. We want to balance, and we want to put the energy into growing the fruit. So one of the things that is critical is to use what they call low vigor rootstock. The thing that's different about making wine rather than other farming is we really want to lower our yield per acre. As a general rule of thumb, you don't want to go over about 4 tons an acre as a general guideline for wine grapes, because once you do that, then you're decreasing the intensity of the fruit, and it's all about the intensity of the flavor. So we actually try and mitigate the load. Now, that doesn't, the accountants don't like that, but that's just the way it is. We really try and stress it for water. That's something else that's very critical. And this thing called pyrazine, or cat pee. With God as my witness, if you go into the Wine Spectator, they wrote up a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc one time, and they literally said this: not bad if you don't mind a little bit of cat pee. So I'm picturing a couple in the store reading that, say, oh, well, we don't mind a little bit of cat pee, so we'll get 3 instead of 6, right? These people are bizarre, I'm telling you. So where this, quote, cat pee comes from is there's an element in grapes called pyrazine, and Sauvignon Blanc tends to be high in it. And it just matures out with heat as the grape matures. Now, one of the things we'll talk about New Zealand in just a minute is it's the cooler of the climates that we're tasting here. So New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs tend to have a little bit more of a grapefruit, and some people describe it as a twang, okay? Well, that twang is the pyrazine. So, now Sauvignon Blanc in California tends to do well in the kind of the key climates. Here's Northern California, Sonoma's there, Napa, the other wine growing areas. You'll notice that all the wine growing areas of California are near the coast, kind of with the exception of this little area in here. And this little area in here, the Lodi, Sierra Foothills area, you know, you've got the Golden Gate Bridge right here, so these are really affected. These are in a thing called the Sacramento Delta, where you've got the Central Valley of California where they grow the tomatoes and all that stuff, right? Well, that's very, very hot and very, very dry. So in the coast, the water off of San Francisco, the Humboldt Current coming down from Alaska is very, very cold. So as the day heats up, the fog is literally drawn in here. I've got a slide that's going to show that a little bit better. But most of the wine growing areas for good wine in California are in the coastal areas because it's cooler. We have that more of a Mediterranean climate. But the fog literally sneaks in, literally right in the Golden Gate Bridge. And if you ever get a chance to get to San Francisco, go in the Golden Gate Bridge, middle to late afternoon, you'll see the fog just kind of rolling past. I got video of it. It's just great. But it goes in, and this is like the entryway into the Central Valley, and so it makes that area a little bit cooler. Okay, so you can grow some, do some wine grapes out there. Going over to France, now this is pretty much the eastern part of France. Sauvignon Blanc is grown in two major areas, the Loire River here in the Loire Valley, and then the Bordeaux area, which is in southwestern France. And it's interesting to taste these two side by side, well, all three of these, because again, these are basically the same grapes. They are different clones. What those clones are, I just don't know. We generally use only about 2 to 3 different clones of Sauvignon Blanc in California. There's not really a wide range. I don't know what clones are dominant in the other areas, but you know, the wines tend to be basically the same, but we're seeing some differences to them. Just like to get any thoughts or opinions on what you did. Who liked the first wine? Okay. Oh, good, that's mine. That makes me feel very glad. So I can go to work tomorrow now. What about the second one? Okay. One, okay. You a Tea Party voter there? No, I'm just kidding. Number 3, the New Zealand. Half a vote?
It's really sweet.
Yeah. And you notice, right, with the New Zealand, you get that. There's a little bit of acid right on the finish. It finishes, and you don't really, you're not, or at least I'm not, you don't taste the fruit as much as the last impression is really the acidity, and the fruit's not lingering there. So, yeah, I like the Sancerre just because, you know, the French Sauvignon Blancs, or the Loire Valley, it's on my bucket list. I've got to go there, but that's like one of those places that they just make great wine there. So, yeah, and so generally the way that you'll see, because French wine labels tend to label their grapes by the place name. The French have been at it for hundreds of years, so what they have learned and what their wine laws recognize is that if you're gonna make a white wine in the Loire Valley, and from the Sancerre era, it's going to be Sauvignon Blanc because we know that's what does best. You know, you can try and grow Chardonnay there, you can grow whatever, but you're not going to label it because it's not it doesn't do well there. This is the best. So the thing with French wines and Italian wines as well, they trade off the place name. So the two that you're most likely to see in the U.S. in the marketplace will be Sancerre and Puy-Fumé. Okay. Now most U.S. wineries will label the wine by the grape variety. So that's what, you know, we're starting to see some that will, some French producers, some Italian producers, in some instances they actually add the name of the grape, but with those countries you just kind of have to know that, okay, well if it says this, that means it's this particular grape. So. The other main area where you'll have Sauvignon Blanc is the Bordeaux region, and usually if Cabernet Sauvignon grows well in an area, Sauvignon Blanc will tend to grow well in that area. There are two that tend to be related. Well, they are related, so it's interesting that it really makes sense that they would grow well in the same area since one is the parent of the other. So the Bordeaux area also does a lot with Sauvignon Blanc. Usually in the Graves area, you'll see if it's a white wine, it'll say Appellation Graves Contrôlé. Appellation Contrôlé is just basically the name of the wine laws. It's the law of controlled place names is what it is. The other thing about Sauvignon Blanc is very interesting. It makes a very, very sweet dessert wine. They're called Sauterne and Barsac. And this is a wine that literally is affected by a mold called Botrytis cinerea. And the wines are very, very expensive. I mean, they're pretty rare, but literally what has happened is the mold has attacked the fruit, punctured the skin, let water evaporate. You're looking horrified there. There's so much that goes on winemaking that you just don't want to know about. I'm telling you. It's like, you know what, just give me the bottle. I don't know about it. You know, it's like politics, sausage, and wine. You don't want to know how they're made, right? So what this does is it makes this very, very intense dessert wine. And I'm telling you, if you ever have it, get some good pecan pie because it's just to die for. It's just the great. It has this nutty type flavor to it, and they're really fabulous. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about New Zealand because New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is very, very dominant in the marketplace. So you're going to see a lot of it out there. Okay. Primarily grown on the northern part of the southern island in the Marlborough area. One of the challenges with New Zealand is they tend to get a lot of rain. One of the great things about California is we get rain January, February, March, and that's about it, and then it's done. One of the issues here is they get a lot of rain, which tends to promote leaf and shoot growth. And again, so that's where canopy management is very, very important. Otherwise, you get this overly herbaceous flavor that Sauvignon Blanc, it tastes like, people say it's weedy or overly grassy. Now, a little bit closer look, and so this is Marlborough a little bit closely, and so of course you can see all the mountains and all that. And you'll notice that there's this little river in here, and it's on the flatlands. One of the things you'll notice as we go through most of these areas is most of the better wine growing areas of the world tend to be around a body of water because it tends to moderate the climate. You know, we don't want areas that, we want areas that have more of a Mediterranean climate or have some moderating influences. You know, the great thing I talked about, the fog coming in, you know, I'll say that for Pinot Noir because I'm going to talk about that. But you'll notice as we go through on these maps, you'll see a lot of rivers. That's really critical. Okay, so it looks like the winner on that one was the Charlotte's Home, the first one, okay? So go ahead now, we have 3 Chardonnays in the next row. The first wine is a Petit Chablis, and I'll define these a little bit more as we go through. The second is the Rodney Strong Chalk Hill. That's the one from California in the volcanic ash. And then last is a Chardonnay from the Burgundy region of France. So the key, Chardonnays tend to be more medium bodied, tends to be their characteristic. The acidity tends to be in the medium range. Oak tends to be a dominant taste to Chardonnay. And the dominant flavor characteristics of Chardonnay tends to be in that apple, citrus, kind of pineapple, pear flavors, if you will. So, what else do I need to tell you about Chardonnay? This is a wine that is very, very different in its style in terms of it can be dry to kind of semi-dry, and there's no actual regulation as to what dry means. So it's really a matter of the style of the winery. The other dominant flavor is that butteriness that I talked about because I'd say as a general rule of thumb, most Chardonnays tend to go through malolactic fermentation, or conversion, I should say.
What about the Chablis?
That's a good, I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. With Chablis, they tend to, they tend to not to age as much in oak. Some people think that they don't age in oak at all, which is not true, but they tend to, it's really not as big a factor as it is in Burgundy and in California. They tend to use older barrels, et cetera. But I would imagine they do. But I'll need to check. I just don't know off the top of my head. That's a good question. So some key facts about, well, I think I've talked more about, one of the key things here I want to tell you about Chardonnay that's I've talked before about how harvest level is very, very quickly. Chardonnay, more so than any other variety, as it gets closer to optimal ripeness, once you get past ripeness, the acid level drops very, very quickly. So that's something that winemakers and vineyard people need to be aware of. There are about 34 officially recognized clones of Chardonnay. There's one, my favorite is one called the Accountant's Clone. And it's called the Accountant's Clone because it's a very high yield in terms of volume, so the accountants love that one very much. This is a great picture about, this is 2 Chardonnay barrels, and what happens in the barrel as the wine is fermenting in the barrel is there's a sediment that develops called lees, and it shows well with Chardonnay. So what happens as it's basically yeast and suspended solids and extract that have all in there. Well, they settle down to the bottom, and a lot of winemakers will leave their wine on the lees for an extended period of time because it develops a kind of a creaminess in the wine. And so this is an example. It just shows you the lees on the bottom, and then they just kind of stirred it up there so you can kind of see that it's really, winemaking, particularly when the wine's in barrel, it's not pristine, it's not crystal clear. We generally will put wine through generally a fining and or a filtration process before we go to bottling. But this is something that is done a lot with Chardonnay that will sometimes give it kind of a creaminess to it, and it will increase the body a little bit. In looking at Chardonnay in California, Chardonnay prefers the cooler areas, and this is something that we've learned over time. The southern areas of Sonoma County, for example, in Russian River, Chalk Hill, Carneros, Monterey, and Santa Barbara. Those tend to be the areas where we grow Chardonnay. And remember I mentioned that Sauvignon Blanc tends to go well with where Cabernet Sauvignon is. When we get to the Pinot Noir map, you're going to see it's very, very similar to this as well. So those two go hand in hand as well. Okay, so the first wine is, I have to talk about Chablis first. So we're going to go now to the Burgundy region in France, and this is where they make some of the best Chardonnay in the world. And the northernmost region in Burgundy is this area called Chablis. Now, we're all very familiar with the term Chablis because the American winemakers really kind of bastardized that term about 30 years ago, and it was used to really describe any kind of generic white wine. But Chablis from northern Burgundy is really very, very unique. And what's interesting about it's all about the soil. Again, soil, soil, soil. And here it's limestone, clay, and fossilized oyster shells. I mean, this soil there is just really, really rich. And there's no surprise that this wine really goes well with oysters because it's grown in that soil. So the first wine is it's called a Petit Chablis. They have different classifications to their wines, the French do, and so this is the tier for everybody but Warren Buffett, okay? Because the way you can tell, as they go up, they go much higher in price and much smaller in area. During the break, because I was having some trouble with internet, but there's a great YouTube video I'm going to pull up when we get back from break. I'll show up, but it really explains the whole Chablis area very, very well. It runs about 7 minutes. So that is that's the Chablis. Now the second wine is the Chalk Hill, and I'm going to go back. This is from Sonoma County, and this is that area that has the volcanic ash that it's grown in. So that's Chardonnay, wine number 5, Chardonnay. And then wine number 6 is a wine from, it's a generic wine from Burgundy. So if a white wine is going to use the term Burgundy on there, it has to come from Chardonnay. Again, that's just the regulations and the rules. And white wines from Burgundy can be very, very expensive if they come from this particular area called the Côte d'Or, which is a combination of these two regions, Côte de Nuits and Côte de Beaune. The Côte de Chalonnais or Maconnais tend to be much more affordable Chardonnays. They're not quite as expensive, and they tend to sell a lot more, as you can well imagine. So just kind of show of hands, wine number 5, who preference was that? Wine number 5, okay, about a little bit more than a third. What about the second wine?
Oh, wait a minute, there was
Don't listen to me. Wine number 4, the first Chardonnay. Okay, sorry. Wine number 4. Okay? That's the Petit Chablis. So this is from that northern area of France.
So 2 of them were from France.
Yes, we're France, California, France. What about wine number 5? Okay. Sweet. Yeah, that's mine again. Okay, what about wine number 6?
Yeah.
Okay. So what stood out for you on any of the particular wines? What did you like, or what did you not like about a particular wine? That's just as important as what you did like. And as we go through and do these, do you see the subtle differences? Again, they all taste like Chardonnay. They have that basic taste profile, but they'll have different nuances and characteristics to them. I'm sorry, I cut you off. What did you say?
They all taste quite different.
Okay.
The first one I felt like I had to, and I prefer red wine, but the first one, number 4, I felt like I had to kind of, after I first tasted it the second time, I felt like I had to brace myself. I don't know how to describe, like acidity or bitter. It just felt like, ugh, and then I felt like 5 and 6 were more smooth or I can't.
Yeah, there's a kind of a strange aftertaste on the first one for me. It's just, I don't know what that is.
Like now I'm in the
Okay.
very good at describing it.
Does the fifth one have what you're talking about, the tobacco and the coffee taste?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would, again, most of the, I'm sorry?
More buttery.
These wine, the second Chardonnay. Yeah, number 5. Yeah, that one, because that one goes through a full malolactic conversion, meaning the entire batch was converted. It goes through the conversion, and that's the direct correlation to the buttery flavor. So, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, generally with again with the white wines, the descriptors tend to fall more in the kind of the herbal descriptors, dill, honeysuckle, things like that. Generally, the descriptors like tobacco, etc., tend to follow red, but again, I never want to say that no, you're not tasting that, because again, the one thing that is true about wine is that there's no absolute, because everybody's tastes and sensitivities are so different. And
It's complicated. Things like
well, think body, taste, and flavor.
I mean with everyone's nuances.
Right.
And the people make it.
And that's what makes it so interesting, and that's why there's no right answer. I'll swear to God, I've been going to tastings for years with these supposed experts, and this guy's here, this person. There's no right answer. It's very, very interesting to be in a room of tasters. And we used to, as an example, in my last winery, we used to do a tasting of our Cabernets versus the top Cabernets from Bordeaux. And I had the best tasters in D.C., 30 of them in a room, and these are very expensive wines that they've sold for a lot of years, and they make a lot of money off them. And out of the 30 people, we had 6 wines, 3 French and 3 Californian. And out of those 30 people, only one person correctly guessed, okay, well, this one's French, this one's California, which is the base level. I mean, that's the least thing they could guess. And of the French wines, they knew it was 3 of 5 possible wines, because we were using these, what they call the first gross, which are considered the top wines of Bordeaux. There's only 5 of them. So they knew that 3 of the 5, and nobody could get it. So that's really instructed me that, this is, when you taste wine blinds, it is so humbling. And, the people that are great at it, the masters of wine, I think there's more 300 game winners in Major League Baseball than there are masters of wine. I mean, it's crazy hard. So don't worry about that, but just try and figure out, the body and what taste and what flavors are you getting and what you like. That's the key, is to figure out what you like and what you don't like. That's really the key. Okay, the last wine, wine number 6. Anybody care for that one?
Yeah. I like
Okay, all right. I like that better than the first one.
it. Yeah, I do.
Burgundy is the last one.
It is the appellation is just Bourgogne Chardonnay. It's sherry from the distributor picked it out for me. So, and one thing you're starting to see now, this is a little bit unusual in that it says Bourgogne Chardonnay, and I had a picture I was going to try and put up there, but I couldn't, about 2 different French wine labels, because there's There's one that uses a control place name, and another one that is kind of the new way of labeling where it has the varietal. And it's interesting because they're exactly the same grape from exactly the same area, but other than the word France, there's not one similar word on both labels. So, I mean, it's like, it should be. So there's, you folks have no chance out there. So it's kind of crazy. Just keep drinking. There you go. That's right. Keep drinking. We got numbers to make. That's right. Okay. So now we're going to talk about our last white wine. I know it'll be about 10 minutes or so before we break. Okay, just to let you know. So now we're going to talk about Riesling. Riesling is really a wine that can be just about whatever you want it to be. It can be very, very dry. It can be very, very sweet. It all depends on what they want to do. The great thing about Riesling is the acidity tends to be high, and that helps the wine, number one, age, and it helps it stand up to when it's a little bit sweeter. Because the thing about winemaking is we want the wines to taste balanced. And if you don't want the wine to taste too sweet, if you have sweetness, you want some acidity to balance out. And so this high acidity that Riesling has is why it tends to do well as a dry or sweet wine, and not all can do that. In terms of the fruits, tend to be more the stone fruits, citrus, lime, etc. A lot of people get kind of a mineral flavor out of it as well. This one, this petrol, I've never really gotten that one, to be honest with you, but a lot of wine writers say that German Rieslings have this petrol quality to it. I've never gotten that, and I don't get it, but I put it in there because it's written enough. So Germany, a little bit in France, but U.S. and Washington State. So go ahead and taste the three Rieslings. Now, the thing that's interesting that I just learned this the other week is that Riesling is an offspring of this Goulet Blanc and Pinot Noir, which is the same exact combination that produced Chardonnay. So I've got to read more about this because it kills me, but the same two grapes got together that produced Chardonnay, which we just had, and also ended up developing into Riesling as well. And then ice wine is actually a wine where the grapes have literally frozen on the vine, and ice wines are actually made in Canada as well, and they're rich and honeyed, and they're just incredible. Again, and that's something else that's great with pecan pie. So back to the Rieslings. Just a quick show of hands. Who prefers Riesling number 7? Okay. Okay, what about number 8? Okay. What about number 9? Okay. All right. Probably, yeah, clearly the Mosel number 8 was the one thing that I love about Riesling is it's interesting is a lot of my colleagues, I mean, a lot of us have been in the wine business a long time, and what I find interesting is a lot of wine professionals, I hate to say wine people, it sounds so weird, tend to gravitate towards Riesling because it's light, but there's just something about it that it's so refreshing. And the thing that amazes me is more so than the other wines, how the Rieslings tend to jump, the aroma tends to jump out of the glass more. It's much more obvious. So let's start with our first Reds Pinot. So go ahead and try the 3 Pinot Noirs. Now, Pinot Noir is my favorite red, so I'm sure you're going to want to know that, right? Whoops, wrong one. There we go. Now, with Pinot Noir, Pinot Noir is one of those. It's a grape that we struggled to make in California, and really until about the last 15 years. And it's really been in the last 15 years or so in California and also in Oregon, where the quality of Pinot Noir has come up dramatically. When I started working for a winery back in the late 80s, we didn't talk about Pinot Noir. I mean, if it was there, it was there. If you wanted it, that was fine. But now it's just hot. It's just great. And the thing we learned about Pinot is, in California anyway, that it's about climate. Something that, of course, was learned in Burgundy many, many years ago. The dominant characteristics here, I don't have them highlighted, but body tends to be medium in body in terms of the Pinot Noir. And really, the acidity is medium, very low tannin in Pinot Noir. We saw that picture when I was talking about tannin earlier, about that small little cluster of grapes that was Cabernet Sauvignon. It was a very small berry with a very thick skin. Pinot Noir is a medium-sized berry with a very, very thin skin. So remembering that tannin comes from the skins, there's always going to be less potential tannin in Pinot than there is in Cabernet. So as a general rule of thumb, it won't age as long as Cabernet will because it doesn't have that tannin. The key flavors that you tend to get out of Pinot Noir, you probably will know them by now, but plum, cherry, and kind of an earthy mushroom flavors to it. So Pinot Noir is just a great, great wine, particularly if you like mushroom risotto. This is one of the best combinations out there, I'm telling you. So we are tasting 3 Pinots. Let me run through the areas real quickly. Well, a couple facts about Pinot. One of the things about Pinot that's very interesting is they call it the heartbreak grape because it's so hard to grow, and because you can do everything right and then it just falls apart at the end. One of the reasons is the grape mutates actually very, very easily. So this is actually the parent of this whole family of grapes: Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, Chardonnay, etc. Riesling has a play in there someplace. Requires a very, very cool climate. And one of the challenges that we've had in California, particularly with Pinot Noir, is we were growing it in the wrong spot. And the challenge with Pinot is it's a very, very quick, hot fermenter. And when we ferment wines, we want a balanced fermentation because all the flavor and color comes out of the skins into the juice. So we need some time. So Pinot Noir, if left on its own, could ferment in about 3 days. Now, why is this important? This is similar to, let's say you're making soup at home or stock. And if you take the bones and put them in the water for about 15 minutes, to make stock, or you put them in there for a day, that's the difference. So we want enough time to really draw the flavor and color out of the skins and into the juice. So, and that's something that the wineries have had to deal with in different ways. So Pinot Noir is a great wine, but it can be very, very hard to make. Now, you've heard me talk a lot about clones, and we saw the picture in the tannin about the Cabernet and just the regular table grapes, but these are 4 different clones of Pinot Noir. So you can see by the picture, they're clearly the very structure, the clusters themselves are very, very different. And if you look closer, you also notice that the berry size varies very much between the different types of clusters as well. So, this is kind of a great example of the differences of clones within one grape variety. This is why Pinot Noir is going to taste different, because these clones or these clusters are so different, and they tend to have different characteristics. Did anybody here take the Washington State class? I did, Pacific Northwest.
Well, maybe.
Okay. Well, that other guy, was it? No, he's a hack. So, but the winery, we have a thing where we actually taste we have the individual clones before they're bottled together, and it's a fascinating tasting. Yeah, okay, we did it right at the end, yeah, with the clones, and it was great because you see, I mean, clearly they're Pinot Noir, but they taste so different, and when you put them all together, and most wineries will use a combination of different clones. Okay, so California, this is very similar to the Chardonnay. We grow it in the cooler regions, Russian River Valley, Carneros, etc. It can grow in Monterey, and it grows very well in Santa Barbara as well. This is the fog pattern. So this is basically the Russian River Valley area. So this is why I refer to it. So this is about 7:30 in the morning. Of course, we're about 2 hours north of San Francisco. Sonoma's right here. Napa Valley's over here. So we've got the Humboldt Current bringing all that cold water down from Alaska. As the day progresses, the sun is, of course, coming across. It's heating up. And the great thing that allows us to make great wine is we get a lot of sunshine, a lot of heat. But more importantly, we have this fog, because the fog, as you'll see, rolls in the late afternoon and keeps the acidity in the fruit, because it basically cools down the fruit. If we didn't have this fog effect coming in the afternoon, basically the grapes would over-ripen, the acidity would drop out, and we really wouldn't be able to have great fruit. So this is 7:30 in the morning. Oh, whoops, there we go. So you get to about noon, you see Napa's cleared out, all except for the Carneros area, which is in the southern part of the county or the valley. Still a little bit of fog up in Russian River. This is where we grow all of our Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, because it likes that cool area. We grow our Cabernet up here in the Alexander Valley because it's warmer. And that's one of the things that makes wine country a little bit odd, is that the southern area is actually cooler than the northern area. I mean, that's obviously usually flipped. but it's all because of the fog. So we get into about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can see the fog has kind of retreated. The valley is pretty clear, except for the really right along the coast. Napa's totally clear. We get in about, I think it's about 5 o'clock, and the fog starts rolling up again. So it rolls up here. Alexander Valley's up here, so it kind of comes up here and then comes back out that way up towards Lake Sonoma. But that's, and again, it's this fog coming in that gives us that, we have about a 30 to 40 degree swing between the daytime high and the nighttime low. And that's what's critical to making the great wine because it maintains the acidity. So again, similar patterns in other areas as well. You've got this effect that makes it so that you save the acidity. The first wine we're tasting is actually from Oregon, and Oregon's a very, very interesting area. You know, when you look at California, Oregon, and Washington State, they're very, very different areas for very, very different reasons. The best wines that will come out of Oregon are Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, and Chardonnay, because the challenge with Oregon is there's no real coastal mountain range here. So they have to grow grapes that are going to ripen before the autumn rains come in. Okay, so you will really not see, except for maybe down here in the southern part of Oregon, you really won't see Cabernet Sauvignon grown there because it will get too cold before it has a chance to ripen because Cabernet ripens later. So, you know, Oregon's all about Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris. Now we're getting to the best place in the world for Pinot Noir. The Côte d'Or, the Burgundy region in France, is split into 2 regions, the northern, the Côte de Nuit, and the southern, the Côte de Beaune. And it's really the Côte de Nuit, this northern area, where you have just life-changing wines. I know that sounds kind of weird, but these are where the greatest Pinot Noirs in the world are made. And I'll tell you, one of my incredible moments was I was sitting in out at the winery way back when, and you know, red Burgundies are very expensive. So I was about 5 years out of college. So I wasn't exactly drinking a whole lot of red Burgundies, right? And we're at a dinner, and this one was served, and you know, I never really got red Burgundy before, and what the big deal was. But this wine just kind of leapt out of the glass, and it was like, oh my God, I never thought that anything could taste like that. So these wines are just brutally expensive, very, very small. Growing regions. The land is divided up. It goes back to literally the French Revolution. So you may have a grower that has 1 hectare or 2 hectares, and you know, it's not like in Bordeaux where there are estates and it's all under, you know, 1 chateau. It's like mayhem here. Okay, so you have many, many different growers who will own these wines, and they're like what we saw in Chablis. They have the different levels to them: Grand Cru, Premier Cru, Bourgogne, etc. So. And I think, yes, that was all for Pinot. So you've tasted the 3 Pinots. What stands out about the show of hands? Number 1, no. Okay. Number 2. Okay. You're voting twice. She's from Chicago or something? I mean, what is this? Yeah. They have to. I gotta vote. I'm dead, but I gotta vote. And number 3. Okay. I'm not just saying this, but I love number 3. No, I do. It's got that aftertaste to it. It's like a little smoky, and it's like bacon. It tastes like bacon. God. Well, that wine, we make it, but actually the guy, it's called Davis Bynum. There's a guy named Davis. He was like the pioneer of Pinot Noir in Russian River. He was the first guy to actually make it there and label it. And he works for us. And he's retired. He's like 85 years old and just a great guy and just makes great wine. So. The other thing I want you to notice about the Pinot Noirs is, particularly compared to the other 2 red wines that we're going to have, the Shiraz and the Cabernet, the Pinots are very, very light in color. Okay, so you never worry about color with Pinot Noir. You know, one of the things when you go to wine class and they talk about tasting, you always look for the color, etc. The thing about Pinot Noir is it doesn't throw a lot of color. So don't really worry about it. If you see it very, very light in color, don't really worry about that. That tends to not be an indicator of the intensity of the wine. Okay, as it could be with Cabernet and Syrah, etc. So you don't have to worry about that with Pinot Noir. Okay. All right, let's go on to Shiraz or Syrah. Okay, now this is the This is one of the 6 noble varieties, and one of the ones that people think is literally the best red wine grape in the world, and really does a wide variety of styles as well also. Tends to be medium and full body. The tannin can be anywhere from medium to heavy depending on the style of what the winemaker wants to do. The dominant flavor characteristics of Shiraz or Syrah tends to be this kind of black pepper, spicy, earthy flavor to it. There's a lot of people that think that, again, Syrah is just the best overall red wine in the world. And it's, so we're going to taste them from, one's from California. The first wine is from California.
Is it yours?
No, it's not mine. It's Benzinger from the North Coast. The second wine is from the Rhone Valley. And then the third Shiraz, which is number 15, is from Australia. So let me talk about the areas quickly. Kind of key facts about Syrah. It comes from these grapes that I've never heard of. One of the interesting things about Syrah in some areas, they actually do a co-ferment with Viognier, which is a white wine, because Viognier has a very perfumed, very floral aroma. So there are certain parts in the Rhone, and a few folks in California are actually doing a co-ferment with Viognier. Syrah is probably it's had the worst PR agent of any of the big varieties. You know, I mean, everybody knows Cabernet, Merlot, and Chardonnay, but Syrah is really not as well known. But it's really, in terms of quality, it's definitely up there. And it's probably the grape I know the least about, because quite honestly, I've never sold any Shiraz because I've never represented an Australian winery. But it's really grown in a lot of different areas in Australia, but Hunter Valley, Barossa Valley are some of the key areas. And as you taste through, let me let you taste through before I kind of talk about stylistics, because I don't want to prejudice anybody. But it's a very interesting wine, and hopefully it'll come through. So let me talk about the Rhone real quickly. The Rhone is really where the Syrah grape really shows its best. And the Rhone is divided into two areas, and the northern Rhone is really considered the best quality region between the north and the south, and Syrah is king here. So all these areas that you see, these names, and these are the names that you will see on the labels: Creuse Hermitage, Cornas, Hermitage, and Côte Rôtie. These are these names of these villages, and if you see that, it's going to be 100% Syrah. And again, as I mentioned, the Côte Rôtie, for example, you're allowed to blend up to 20% of Viognier into the blend. And a lot of people like that because it really gives it a very, very perfumed aroma to it. The thing that there's more of a continental climate here because we're kind of inland. The Rhone is kind of inland, so it tends to be a little bit colder climate than the Bordeaux, which is a little bit more of tends to be more of a maritime climate too. You know, it makes me think that one of the I spoke before about oak and the differences in oak, et cetera, and there are wineries that will only order oak from a specific forest in France. And there's a forest down by Bordeaux called Limousin, and it's more of a looser grain to it. There's some forests in central France, Nevers, Trancé, Allier, that tend to have more of a colder continental climate, so they'll tend to have a tighter grain of oak to it. And so some winemakers prefer these, literally will order barrels just from these particular forests because they like that particular flavor that you get from that area. And again, that's one of those variables that makes the wines taste differently. Getting into the southern Rhone, the Syrah here tends to be blended with Grenache and Mourvedre. And what you tend to see is most out there is a label called Côtes du Rhône, and these tend to be a little bit more affordable, and they can be very, very good wines as well. So, what are your thoughts on the three wines? I haven't tasted them yet. I wanted to get your thoughts.
What was the first one again?
First wine's from California. It's the Benzinger Syrah. Next is the Creuse Hermitage from France. And then the last is the Penfolds Highland Shiraz. Now, in Australia, it's called Shiraz. I don't really know why, but it's called Shiraz, but it's the same grape. So any preferences, wine number one? Wine number two? Whoa. Okay. Wine number 3.
They're all very similar.
Yeah, I don't like the last one at all. Yeah, that's got a. It's got like a. It's like an overripe. Yeah, generally the Australian. Oh, that's just me. Generally, the Australian Shiraz tend to have a sweeter jamminess to it. That's not coming through in that wine. But it's definitely bigger. There's definitely a lot more tannin. You feel that kind of grittiness that you get on the back of your upper lip. That's that tannin. And so it's got that tannin, but it doesn't have the flavor to carry it through. I like the middle one the best. The Rhones, I think, is really where the Syrah does best. Yeah, I'm not going to spit that one out. Yeah, I was doing this class one time, and as you see, I spit because I need to. And I said, I made the comment, I said, I think I've spit out more wine in my life than I've actually drunk. And the lady was sitting there, she said, that's just wrong, That's like, oh,
So this one is Australian.
Australian, then the French, the Côtes du Rhône, and then the Californian. Yeah, that was an underwhelming vote. That's interesting. So next time we'll do 3. Well,
See, this
maybe
is
I'll.
kind of wine I usually drink, and I don't think any of them taste like anything I drink. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
just drinking really cheap ones.
Yeah, it's like I said, Syrah has not had the best popularity. Now, Côtes du Rhône, they tend to be very good. They're really good with like if you're having like a stew or something that's got some good earthy flavors to it. But the wines in general is not as popular. And Australian Syrah, I've never been a big fan of Syrah because the Australian Syrahs tend to be big and bold, and they make that that over the top kind of style. I just don't care for that personally. So. That was your responses were interesting there.
What kind
So.
of red wine in the U.S.?
I'm sorry?
What do people prefer?
Well, in terms of sales in the U.S., Chardonnay's number 1 at about 28%. Cabernet and Merlot hang out at like 15 and 16. And that's and then you get into, it's a crowded field between like Pinot Noir, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio, Zinfandel. I don't think any of them have broken 10% yet, but but Chardonnay's king, and then Cabernet, and then Merlot. Of course, Pinot Noir became very popular after the Sideways movie, which was a real pain in the butt because, see, in the wine business, we need to know what's happening 4 years out because of the way it takes 4 years to create a vineyard, and really by the time you identify a plot of land and the time you're really selling your wine, you're talking anywhere from an 8 to 10 year cycle. So we need to know what's going to happen a long time out. So when after that Sideways movie came out, Pinot Noir sales went up 72% in 6 months, and that's not good. Now, in any other business, that would be good, but it's not good in the wine business. And as an example of how that translates into the business, I was talking to one of the winemakers, and we had a grower whose contract was coming up for renewal as this craze was going on. And his previous contract was a 3-year contract at about $1,700 a ton. To re-up, he wanted a 10-year deal, and he wanted $3,500 a ton. So imagine your cost doubling overnight over a 10-year time horizon. You got to figure that into your thing. So it's been pretty crazy. Some Pinot in Sonoma County goes for more than the Cabernet, which would never happen. And Pinot Noir in Sonoma is about $3,200 a ton. Cabernet's about $25 to $35. Napa Cabernet is about $5,000 a ton. And if you do the math, it's 70 cases a ton. So it's grape cost is pretty crazy. Okay, so that's the Southern Rhone. Okay, we'll get on to Cabernet Sauvignon, the king of it all. The dominant taste, Cabernet tends to be full-bodied. The dominant taste characteristics tend to be tannin from medium to extreme. All depends on the winemaker. Oak tends to be medium or heavy. I mean, you generally wage your Cabernet in oak. And then the key flavor characteristics tend to be these deep red fruits like currant, blackberry, raspberry, blueberry, etc. Cabernet is all about tannin and the what we call the intended use of the wine. Now, most wineries, us included, will make several different Cabernets. I call them your Monday through Thursday night Cabernet, your Friday night Cabernet, and your Saturday night Cabernet or your event wine. You know, the problem with wine people will sit there, oh, well, this one has a little bit more structure and integrity and mid-patty palate, et cetera. And one day I was describing 2 Cabernets to a customer, and I could tell they weren't getting it, and I was not doing a good job. So finally I said, this is your Monday through Thursday night Cabernet, it's $15. This one's your Friday night Cabernet because it's $19, and this is your event wine. When somebody's coming over and you need something from them, you serve that one, okay? So that's the better way to describe Cabernet, I found, rather than hints of anise and huckleberry and all that other stuff. So nettles and elderflower.
It wasn't that wine, but whatever.
Yeah, it's it's funny. I make fun of those people, but there's some people that truly have gifted palates and nose, and they can pick up all those things. But it's some of it you're just sitting there. Actually, my very first wine tasting I went to, I was 19 years old, and I was working up in Maryland in a store, and I didn't know anything what all this stuff was about. So we're at a tasting, and there's the owner of a winery there. And all the people from the trade who worked in the stores were there to learn about the gentleman's wine. And so he's up there talking, and a group of about 30 there. And so he starts talking about the wine, and this guy over here starts, kind of contradicting him and not being real rude, but like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And, it just seemed odd, right, that you didn't do that in polite society to kind of contradict the guy who made the wine. And so he would talk about the wine, and this guy would chime in, yada, yada. And this went on for about 4 or 5 wines. And then finally, he was talking about the wine, and this guy starts up again, and this guy over here just says, hey, would you mind, he said, would you mind letting the guy who made the wine tell us what it tastes like before you lead us astray? And that's when I realized in this business there's 2 camps. You don't want to be that guy or you want to be normal people. And so it's interesting that, because the thing about wine is it's whatever you like and whatever suits your taste. That's a good wine. So, I don't know. You got me on my little soapbox there. Okay, so Cabernet Sauvignon. So the key facts about Cabernet, it's a blend of Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc. The other key things, this is kind of a key thing, is there was, Cabernet is big in the Bordeaux region in France. And the reason it's big is about in the 1840s, I guess it was, some American decided, hey, what would be a great idea? I'm going to take some American grapevines over to France and see how they do. Well, in America, we had this little thing called the phloxera, and it's a little bug that likes to eat the roots of grapevines, okay? Now, they didn't know it. They had never seen it in France. So literally, this thing gets over there, truly devastates Europe. I mean, France, Italy wiped out with this thing. It's crazy. So Cabernet Sauvignon got its big break when they were replanting Bordeaux. They decided that, well, we're going to replant with Cabernet Sauvignon. And so it is now the main grape in the Bordeaux region in France. So it's kind of interesting. Now, what happened in like the early 90s, we had an outbreak of phloxera in the US. It was like this new strain of phloxera. Some people think it was, Sarkozy and those boys getting us back for, what we did to them 150 years ago. So, but it literally, and the only thing you can do is rip out your vineyard and start over. And it literally cost the California wine business about $1 billion. It was just crazy. And I was working for Robert and Dobby Winery at the time, and I remember being there and standing there, and it was just bare. And it was like a bomb had gone off. It was bizarre. It was so bizarre to see that. So. Now, the other thing about Cabernet, it tends to be blended with a lot of other varieties, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and a little bit of Malbec and Petit Verdot in some areas. So one of the big factors about Cabernet Sauvignon from a production standpoint is you can ferment it in oak barrels or oak tanks, as these are, or stainless steel. The benefit of oak, you tend to get a deeper, richer flavor, and obviously some oak characteristics in there and more of that smokiness. The benefit of fermenting in stainless steel is you can control the temperature of the fermentation more, because when you get a fermentation, which is just you take the grape juice, you break them open, you introduce yeast, they eat the sugar, convert it into alcohol, and you get a byproduct, you get heat. That heat is what draws all the color and flavor out of the skins and into the wine. So you want the heat, but you don't want it to get too hot. So the benefit of the stainless steel tanks, that zone there and that zone there are actually cooled. So you can monitor and keep the temperature right where you want it to be. So you have to worry about it getting too hot. Because if it gets too hot, then it sticks. And it's very hard to to deal with that. Looking at Sonoma, Napa, I talked before about Pinot. Now you're going to grow Pinot Noir and down in this Carneros area. Now Carneros actually bleeds over into the southern part of Napa. This whole part of Sonoma would actually be, where is it? This area right here, if you go across Santa Rosa, would come out right about there in Calistoga. So this is the prime area for Cabernet Sauvignon because Napa, like Sonoma, cooler in the southern part, warmer as you go north. Cabernet likes heat. Takes a long time to mature. It's the late spring varietal. Here in Sonoma, this is where we grow Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. It's hotter up here, Dry Creek, Alexander of Nice Valley. So this is where you grow your Cabernet because it needs that warmth. This is a crazy slide, sorry about that. But this is the Bordeaux region in southwest France. And this is where Cabernet is king, and this is some of the greatest regions of the world. And one of the things, you've got the Atlantic Ocean here, and you've got the Gironde River here coming through, kind of bisecting Bordeaux, if you will. And one of the things that I find very interesting about this part of the world where Cabernet does really well is you'll hear wine writers talk about the left bank versus the right bank of Bordeaux. And what they're talking about is this area here, the Medoc, Pauillac, et cetera, versus this area over here. And what's interesting is Cabernet Sauvignon is king here. Over here, it's Cabernet Franc and Merlot. Now, what's crazy is this is literally just across the river. But it's proven over time that Merlot and Cabernet Franc really do best over here. And so what's interesting and fascinating and confusing, if you're buying a Bordeaux, you've got to know what bank it's from and where it is to know what is generally the grape variety that's in there. Because again, these are named after the areas. But it's just the way it is, I guess, right? So the wines that we have, wine number 16 is a Bordeaux. Wine number 17 is actually another Washington State wine. Cabernet does very, very well up there. What? Number 16 is the Bordeaux. It's actually an 06, so it's got some years on it. The number 17 is Washington State Cabernet, and then number 19 or number 19. I'm tired. I need to go home. Number 18 is the Alexander Valley Cabernet. Oh. Yeah. Do I have any more? No, that's wrong.
Let's go over this again.
Okay.
The first one is
Wine number 16 is your Bordeaux. That's the French Bordeaux. Okay. Wine number 17 is from Washington State.
But
Please don't pay attention to the book. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was in there before I sent it off. So don't worry about the book, that chart in the book. Ignore that. Wine number 16 is the Bordeaux. Okay, that's the French Bordeaux. Alrighty? Yeah. 16 is the Bordeaux. Yeah. Number 17 is the wine from Washington State, from Chateau Ste. Michelle, one of their Indian Wells area. And then wine number 18 is in Alexander Valley. It's from California. So you've tasted all those, right?
no. Okay,
So go ahead and taste all three, 16, 17, and 18. Now the Bordeaux is an 06. The Ste. Michelle is an 11. And the California is a 10. So the Bordeaux has a little bit more age on it, and you can tell because the edges are a little thinner. What happens with red wines as they age, the color actually gets a little thinner. White wines tend to darken as they get older. Red wines actually tend to get...
Which is which?
The 10 was the number 18.
But 10 what?
Oh, I'm sorry, 2010 vintage. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's wine speak there. Yeah, the 2006 vintage for the Bordeaux, the 2011 vintage for the Washington State, and then the 2010 vintage for the Californian.
Sato, Road, and
In terms of price range,
the third one. The first one is the third one, right?
I'm sorry, the question?
in terms of price range, are all the ones that taste the same sort of 10 to 15?
Yeah, and the question is about the price range. For the varietals, they all tend to be about the same price. The most expensive wine was the Hermitage. That was 18, and then the Bordeaux was 17. Yeah, and that's wholesale. So you'd add about half onto that for the retail. So just show of hands, who prefers the French? Okay. All right. What about the second Cabernet, number 17? Okay. The second Cabernet, number 17. That's the Washington State. Yes. Okay. Yeah, Cabernet does beautiful up there. What about the last one, the Californian? Okay. Ah, you're killing me, folks. No, I'm just kidding. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. There you. That's right. So now what I've done is I'm going to throw another wine at you because you haven't had enough tonight. Okay. So, but what I want to do, one of the things about Cabernet is its ability to age. Okay. So what I did is I save wine from every year. So what I'd like you to do is get one glass and just kind of dump it out into something else. And what I did is I brought from home a 2003 vintage of wine number 18. Okay, so we just had the 2010. Okay, so now we're going to taste that same wine, but it's 7 years younger, or older, excuse me.
From Washington State?
No. Wine number 18. Yeah, the Rodney Strong Alexander Valley Cab. This is a 2010 vintage. What I brought from home some 2003. Okay, so get a glass and.
And when you say it's the same wine, it's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon.
No, it's not technically the same wine because this wine is made from 6 different vineyards. The blend is a little bit different every year, but in terms of the stylistic and the intention of it.
See, the color's different.
Yeah.
Look.
Okay. Here we go. Yeah, let me just. Oops. Here, I'm gonna.
I'm good.
You good? Okay. Lightweight. Come on, 18 wines. Jeez Louise. Oh, white. Oh, okay. Here we go. Let me. Yeah, just wherever. Just one. It doesn't. There you go. Yeah, it doesn't matter. There you go. Okay, here we go.
Just a little bit, thank you.
I have heard that the Australians call it Shiraz because the grapevines were brought over from the Shiraz province in Iran.
You know, I don't think that's true, but I've heard that as well. Yes. Yeah. No. Bushby is the guy that Colonel Bushby, I think, is the guy that actually brought it over. No, but it's because there's the city that is named Shiraz. Yes, but I don't think that's true. But I was just reading something about that the other day.
What vintage is this?
This is the 2003 vintage.
Where the other one that we had
It's
before?
2010.
The 10.
Yeah. So this is a real good example of. It's not. So this is the 2003 vintage of that wine. Now, it's not technically the exact same wine, the exact same grapes from the exact same vineyards. We blend about 6 to 8 different vineyards into this wine every year. But the winemaker every year tries to make a house style. So he tries to make it, relatively the same because you don't want somebody to like your wine and then you totally make it in a different way the next year and then you turn them off, But I thought this is, I'd love things to do this because it literally shows you, okay, well, this is, the same winemaker, same winery, trying to make the same style of wine, but so this wine has aged over time. So get your impression about that. Now, one of the things about tannin and this wine is made. This is a Friday night wine, so it's not intended to be a wine that you would put in your cellar to age, but you certainly could.
You drank earlier, or the one? Is that the one you just poured? Or the one
No, that's not the one I just poured.
That's the one that we tasted.
That was wine number 18.
Yeah.
This is wine number 18A.
So is this Saturday night one?
This was Friday night a long time ago. So.
And then when I drop.
So the whole goal here is that we basically just time travel, okay? So we have the current day wine, and then that same wine made 7 years ago. And so do you get any differences in impression? Again, when you think of it, think about body, taste, and flavor. Is the tannin more prevalent in one versus the other? Hopefully the 2010, the current release will show more tannin, because one of the things about tannin is it does subside over time. It softens up. And the idea is, if you ever hear people talk about, well, wine being ready to drink, well, what that means is the tannins have softened up where the tine's a little bit more approachable.
But how do you taste it? Okay, I think of like heaviness or body, or just, this one seems thicker or.
Okay, well, what about difference in flavor? Does anybody notice any differences in flavor between the two? Does anything stand out to you? I mean, I don't want to prejudice you with my guess.
Just felt a stronger flavor.
In the 10 or the 3? The 3, okay. A stronger flavor, okay. What flavor, thinking back to red fruits, thinking back to, does it taste more earthy? Does it taste more mushroom? Does it taste more leathery? Leather is a very common descriptor of older Cabernet. The thing that makes these wines interesting and these grapes interesting is that they will develop these flavors over time. That's the big deal about it in one sense. Exactly that. What about, and I don't know, you may think I'm crazy, but does the older version, the 03, does it taste more pruny to anybody else? More like a prune flavor to it? Kind of a prune, yeah. What?
No, I just mean it's got a browner.
Yeah, well, and what will happen over time is the wines will age, and red wines tend to get lighter in color, but they'll get some browning around the edges. Question?
This is a very strange question, but if you smell it, it smells like stinky, like the 2003, kind of a little different smell, than it tastes so much better.
Well, that's not. I'd say that comment is very.
It's not stinky, but it has a different smell if you smell the 2003.
Well, good. What tends to happen as the Cabernets get older is you tend to get the obvious fruit like the blackberry tends to get a little bit softer, and you get these flavors like the leather and the prune, etc. So it evolves in a different flavor.
Like,
And
so if you smell the wine, like if you have it aging and it's sitting there for several years, and you smell, it smells kind of off. It doesn't mean it's going to taste bad. Because I feel like it smells a little off.
it smells different, and that's what makes. That's the big deal about wine, and particularly these wines, is they will develop and evolve, is probably the better word. Evolve these different flavors over time, and particularly with Cabernet. With older Cabernet, that prune flavor just jumps out at me. I'm just very, very sensitive to it. Obviously I tend to not like it as much as I do the current releases, where the fruit is more of a dominant flavor than it is with some of these older wines. But that's kind of the purpose of the exercise, to see how these things evolve over time and see how they change, which is why people pay a lot of money for wines that can age, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Question? No, well, it was about the same. I mean, really wasn't any. They both about $20 retail, so no, there wasn't really any significant. There's probably some inflation in there. Yeah, it's about the 2010's about $22, $20 to $22, depending where you buy it. So. Okay. Well, that's all we have. We do we have a little evaluation form that we would ask you to fill out, if you would please. And then there is some eclairs over there that will actually go very, very well with the 2010 Cabernet. And if anybody has any questions about the Ladybug event coming up, if anybody would like to come to that, we'd love to see you.